The majority of the Committee on Environment and Agriculture, to which was referred House Bill 1145 FN, an act prohibiting the private ownership of landfills. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Peter Bixby for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same, being unable to agree with the majority, report with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Judy, Aron for the minority of the committee. For what reason does the member rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to table HB 1145.
Representative Sweeney moves that House Bill 1145 be laid on the table. Representative Weber asked for a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. The motion is whether to lay House Bill 1145 on the table. Members should be in their seats.
Hey, Representative Alexander, you want to sit down?
Thanks. Representative Sweeney is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know the underlying legislation represents a gross misuse and mismanagement of government by taking over and prohibiting private landfills in the state of New Hampshire, would I now vote green to put it on the table where this bill surely belongs?
Representative Vermont is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I knew if this was such a gross overreach, then my friends would actually want to debate it and demonstrate that point rather than simply dismissing it without having to make an argument. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that this legislation, the underlying bill, it was the unanimous recommendation of a bipartisan, bicameral study committee. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that this is a bill that enjoyed bipartisan sponsorship in our committee and that we have bipartisan speakers lined up to speak in favor of this bill, and if I know, Mr. Speaker, that all of our constituents, whether we live in Keene or we live in Dalton or we live in Rochester or Bethlehem or anywhere else in our state, is tired of being the place where New England dumps its trash, would I vote red so that we can actually talk about the bill? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is whether to lay House Bill 1145 on the table, and it's a roll call vote. If you're in favor of tabling, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 180 in the affirmative, 193 in the negative. Tabling fails. All right. The bill is on second reading and open to further amendment. Representative Romano moves floor amendment 1329H, which can be found in your seat pockets. Representative Simon is recognized to speak in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I don't want to take up a tremendous amount of time right before lunch on this, so I'll keep it really simple. There are speakers behind me that will speak to the merits of the bill itself, but from the previous vote that you just saw, the likelihood of this bill making it through this chamber is fairly decent. So I would submit to you this floor amendment, which basically just says that the state and the landfill owner have to come to an agreement. There needs to be some conversation on that and some agreement on what happens if the landfill leaks due to negligence or mistakes. It is a reasonable addition to the bill. I think it's a protection for the state taxpayers. So I hope that you will vote with me on that, regardless of how you feel on the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions on the adoption of the amendment? A division vote has been requested. Members, take your seats. Questions on the adoption of Amendment 1329H. Representative Aron is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this amendment was not discussed with me or my committee, and if I know that this was not part of any discussion as part of our committee hearings, would I press red to vote against this amendment? Thank you.
Representative Romano is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this last-minute amendment was part of how we put together a strong bipartisan piece of legislation to bring to you all, would I now press the green button so that we can attach this amendment and move on to the bill? Thank you.
The questions on the adoption of Amendment 1329H. This is a division vote, and if you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 234 in the affirmative, 125 in the negative. The amendment's adopted. Now we're on to the main motion of ought to pass with amendment. Representative Aron is recognized to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, the premise of this bill is to ban private ownership of landfills in New Hampshire in order to get around the U.S. Commerce Clause and allow us to limit or even eliminate the importation of out-of-state trash. It grandfathers in existing landfills, so there will be no impact at all to what we already do at those facilities anyway. 4 of the 6 landfills in the state are publicly owned. Almost 50% of those landfills' landfill trash is from out of state. We only have 1 new landfill permit currently being considered at the State Department of Environmental Services, and it appears this bill just seeks to shut that down. It's not even clear what would happen to that permitting process if this bill were to pass. In terms of landfill capacity and need, we will likely only need 1 new landfill for the next 25 to 50 years, especially as we have goals to reduce what we place in landfills. Landfilling also is our last resort in handling solid waste, according to our state solid waste management plan. 9 members of my committee strongly believe that banning private ownership of landfills in New Hampshire in order to control the amount of out-of-state trash being placed into our landfills is wrong. Our state and counties and municipalities already have the ability to establish landfills in our state and have done so successfully in several places. And they currently compete alongside privately owned landfills. These entities can already step up and propose establishing a landfill to fulfill a need. Banning the private ownership of landfills is just not business friendly. Even if a private business enters into a contract with the state, county, or municipality to operate a publicly owned landfill, but not own the land, why would a contractor want to invest millions of dollars in infrastructure on a site that they would eventually abandon, or worse, if their contract is not renewed by the public entity, they'd have to leave it behind. They'd have to hand over all that infrastructure to another contractor who would then run this landfill. The contractor could also possibly walk away from a future environmental disaster, leaving the state to hold the bag and clean up the mess. The devil certainly would be in the details of the contract. There are many other questions regarding state, county, and municipal ownership of landfills, such as, would the government entity likely take land via eminent domain to establish a landfill? Who would have the liability for the land if the land became contaminated or becomes an environmental problem? Should these costs, along with operational costs, be borne by New Hampshire taxpayers? And what about the increase in costs and tipping fees that are likely to occur? This would surely impact New Hampshire taxpayers, and we don't believe that this is the right solution, as it creates many more problems and increases the cost to New Hampshire taxpayers. Considering that we already have a bill that was passed unanimously by our committee that caps out out-of-state trash by 15% in accordance with the U.S. Commerce Clause, and we already passed a bill that pauses the permitting and establishment of a new landfill until 2028, plus other new rules and regulations that are being put into place with regard to landfills, this bill really is unnecessary. And I think our time would be better spent by crafting policies to use current technologies to create better, more innovative ways to dispose of trash, both in-state and out-of-state, and doing a more efficient and cost-effective job of recycling, reusing, repurposing, purifying, and even incinerating the trash that we truck into the current landfills of our state. So I please ask you to vote no on OTPA so another motion can be made, and I request a division vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Potenza is recognized to speak for the committee report.
So I'm pretty much going to speak to the Republican inconsistencies in regards to HB. Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sorry. I'm going to speak to the Republican inconsistencies into HB 1145. So a Republican talking point that is we can't stifle private businesses, right? So I would like to remind y'all when we were talking about passing the bill to ban China from owning land in New Hampshire, and I supported that. So let's say a brand new Beijing-based state-of-the-art solid waste company comes into New Hampshire, buys up all the available property, then they simultaneously put in 10 applications to build massive landfills that have 30-plus year life in New Hampshire. Right now, there is nothing stopping them from doing so because DES only reviews applications and approves based upon rules, not need. Last year, DES told a group of legislators, I was there, and concerned New Hampshire citizens in a meeting, their job is to get the permit applications to a yes. That was concerning for us all to hear. Let me remind this body that even after St. Gobain polluted the drinking water for an entire region in southern New Hampshire, DES approved another permit before the company decided to close up shop. That made us all pretty upset, especially the folks that living in Merrimack. So we were told that it was approved because they can't look at unrelated items outside of the application that is staring right in front of them. Our landfill permitting rules are weak, and the new rules in this process that they're undertaking are looking to be some of the weakest in New England and in the country. So, because trash is a multi-billion-dollar business, and private companies, because of a federal clause, are using New Hampshire as their dumping ground to make sure that they will continue to buy property and build landfills based upon their profit, not needs of the New Hampshire citizens. We all encourage private businesses to build here or come to New Hampshire to improve our economy, our communities, and we want them to be good stewards to our environment. But this is not a typical business. Landfills should not be built based upon anything else but need. Do we really want New Hampshire to become the trash state? The state is letting private businesses drive the trash bus, which is not in the best interest for Granite Staters. If we do things right with reduction, recycling, and new technology to include some amazing things that they're doing with incineration, we should only need one landfill in the next century. This bill enables a public-private partnership. The only thing that the state owns is the land. That's it. This saves the private company time and money. The private company runs everything else. The standard practice, this is actually the standard practice everywhere in the country, besides over 50% of the landfills in the entire country are exclusively public. And Maine, just so you know, when we're talking about that landfill that everybody wants to stop that's happening up north, actually has a public-private partnership with that same company right across the border that is thriving. It's a 32-year contract. These are not private businesses either. Our private operator landfills are from companies that are headquartered outside of New Hampshire. They are in Texas and Vermont. So, to wrap this up, this bill enables the state to pick a good site with good soil near the major sources of in-state generation, rather than being at the mercy of a company and landowner who don't care about the safety or the truck or their traffic distance, and this bill enables us to put New Hampshire taxpayers and our trash first. HB 1145 also would not require the New Hampshire to reduce the flow of out-of-state trash. It merely allows us to be in the driver's seat for us. So, for example, let's say we have a landfill and it's not getting filled. The state can make those decisions to increase that percentage at any time. So, in fact, We could turn on and turn off the flow wholly or partially as we see fit based upon our circumstances. So please join me in passing HB 1145 so that we don't make New Hampshire a sanctuary state of trash from New England, most especially from Massachusetts. It's time to put New Hampshire trash first.
The question on the motion of ought to pass is amended on House Bill 1145. Representative Granger requests a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? That is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. Questions on the motion about to pass as amended on House Bill 1145, and this is a roll call vote. Representative Creighton is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that HB 1145 commits the state to ownership of private operations, if I also know that under current rules, the state or municipalities already own 4 of 6 landfills, and if I also know that to provide safe and effective landfills in the future, we should not limit options for establishing ownership, would I not press the red button so that another more appropriate motion can be made? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rochefort is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this body has a long history of supporting clean water and responsible environmental measures, and if I know that this proposal establishes a balanced relationship where the private and public entities can work together, and if I know that over 50% of landfills in the United States are already publicly owned, with some operated by the same companies conducting business here in New Hampshire, if I know that at one point in the not too distant past, nearly all the trash dumped in New Hampshire was dumped in publicly owned landfills, also known as the town dump. And finally, if I know Granite Staters express strong opposition to the notion of our picturesque state being used as a dumping ground for Massachusetts, then I now hit the green button to keep the trash in Mass.
The question is on the motion of ought to pass as amended on House Bill 1145. It's a roll call vote. If you are in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 208 in the affirmative, 162 in the negative. The motion is adopted. The House will be in recess until 1:45.